Have you ever felt like there's a hole in your pocket? You're making money, but somehow it just seems to vanish. Well, today we're going to pull back the curtain on our relationship with money. We're going to explore those invisible scripts and hidden forces that decide where our hard-earned cash actually goes, a lot of the time without us even noticing. So, does this question hit a little too close to home? That sinking feeling when you look at your bank statement and just think, seriously, where did it all go? If that sounds familiar, trust me, you are not alone. And a huge piece of that puzzle is this number right here, $2,000. Yeah, according to research from Empower, that is what the average person spends on impulse buys every single year. Just think about that for a second. That's a vacation, or a huge chunk of an emergency fund, all just kind of disappearing in these small, unplanned moments. So what in the world is going on in our heads that leads to that $2,000 disappearing act? Well, we're about to find out. Let's dive in and uncover the psychological triggers that are quietly pulling the strings on our spending. Okay, so this brings us to a really fascinating concept called hedonic adaptation. You might have heard it called the hedonic treadmill. Think about the last time you bought something you were super excited about. That initial rush of joy is awesome, right? But it fades. And that's hedonic adaptation in a nutshell. We get used to the new thing, our happiness goes back to its normal level, and that sends us looking for the next hit of happiness from another purchase. So that leads to a really important question. If it's not actually about long-term, lasting happiness, then what is driving these impulse buys? Well, here are the main culprits. A study on the psychology of spending found that a staggering 60% of impulse buys are driven by our emotional state. We're talking stress, boredom, you name it. Then you've got the temptation of a good sale, the endless barrage of social media ads, and of course, that pressure to keep up with what everyone else is doing. It's basically a perfect storm of psychological triggers. But it's not just what's inside our heads. It's also the world around us. Let's talk about how we can get trapped by scarcity and how our environment can sometimes actively work against our financial goals. A classic example of this is something called lifestyle creep. So you get a raise, which is fantastic. But then, almost like magic, your expenses seem to creep up to meet that new income. A slightly nicer car, eating out a bit more, upgrading those subscriptions. It all happens so gradually, we often don't even realize that our financial breathing room has completely vanished. For a lot of people, though, the trap is way more serious. It's called the poverty premium, and it's this really cruel irony that people with the least amount of money often end up paying more for essential goods and services. Things like higher interest rates on loans because of a lower credit score, or paying more for insurance just based on your zip code. It's a systemic headwind that makes it incredibly tough to get ahead. This infographic from a University of Bristol study really breaks it down. We're talking about everything from not being able to get the best energy deals because you can't pay by direct debit, to being forced to use higher cost credit, or paying more for insurance just because of where you live. All these little penalties really start to add up. So how much do they add up to? Well, the study calculated the average cost at £490 a year for a low-income household in the UK. That is a huge financial burden that actively makes it harder for people to escape poverty. And this is the crucial point. This constant financial pressure does so much more than just drain your bank account. It puts an enormous tax on your mental bandwidth. Check out this chart from a study on scarcity and cognitive function. It's pretty fascinating. It shows that people's minds are most consumed by money in the week leading up to payday. That's that big spike in the first set of bars. This intense focus on just making ends meet eats up our mental energy, and that makes it harder to plan for the future, focus on other things, or even resist temptation. So knowing all of this, how do we start to fight back against these pressures, both internal and external? Well, that brings us to the mindset shift. This is all about reclaiming your focus and building a real solid foundation for saving money. This quote from a Case Western Reserve University study really gets to the heart of it. See, it's not just about what tools you use or what tricks you learn. The most powerful factor is developing a personal savings orientation, basically making saving money a core part of your identity, part of who you are. And the research totally backs this up. The study found that people who had this strong savings mindset had the best savings rates, even better than people who just relied on automated tools. And here's the really good news. This isn't something you're just born with. It's a skill you can actually develop by learning the basics and building those positive habits over time. Okay, so once that mindset is in place, we can start using the right tools. Welcome to our final section, your financial toolkit. We're going to look at some practical strategies to put you back in the driver's seat. One of the biggest hurdles for so many of us is debt. So, you ready to conquer it? Let's look at two of the most popular strategies out there. All right, here we have the two heavyweights of debt repayment, the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. The snowball method is all about psychology. You pay off your smallest debts first to get those quick wins and build momentum. The avalanche method, that's pure math. You target the debt with the highest interest rate first, which saves you the most money on interest in the long run. And as this guide from Fidelity shows so clearly, the snowball gives you that amazing feeling of knocking out debts one by one, while the avalanche is the most efficient path from a numbers perspective. There's really no right or wrong answer here. The best method is simply the one you'll actually stick with. As we start to wrap up, let's zoom out a bit from the practical tools and go beyond the bank account to really redefine what financial health is all about. Because here's the ultimate takeaway. This whole thing, it isn't just about spreadsheets and account balances. Getting a handle on your finances is about freeing up your mind. It's about reducing that cognitive load that comes from scarcity and stress, so you actually have the mental space to focus on building a life that you truly value. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Your money is a tool, and every single dollar you spend or save is part of a bigger story. So what story do you want your money to tell about your life, your priorities, and your future? Thanks for watching.